You're listening to Online Pet Health Podcasts with Dr. Megan Kelly. Continuing education for veterinarian rehabilitation therapists. Learn more at onlinepethealth.com.
Hey Vet Rehabbers, Dr. Megan Kelly here, and you're listening to the Veterinary Rehabilitation Podcast. In today's podcast, which is a behind the rehab practice, I speak to Sasha Foster. She is Rehabilitation Coordinator at the Colorado State University Teaching Hospital. She is on the faculty of the Canine Rehabilitation Institute, owner of the Canine Rehab Shop, and founder of Canine Home Exercises. She's also an award-winning author of 12 books, and we chat about self-publishing and how all of you vet rehabbers, if you've got knowledge that you want to share, can easily get into self-publishing your own books. What an interesting chat and what an inspiring vet rehabber. Over to Sasha. Welcome, Sasha. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Megan. It's nice to visit with you.
Sasha, you have such an interesting story, all the things that you've been doing, and we're going to touch on every single one of them throughout the podcast. But I thought as an introduction, it would be wonderful if you could let our listeners know how you actually came into canine rehabilitation, so your journey.
I came to canine rehabilitation accidentally. I was a human physio with human physio practice with the insurance companies kind of pushing me up against this wall that I didn't like to be against. And I was at my sister's house on her living room floor watching Oprah when she came home from agility with one of her Doberman pinschers. And he just laid himself in my lap and said, "Massage me," because that's the way a Doberman is. And I just started working on him. I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing. And he had this itchy spot on his shoulder. So I massaged it out, and then I got him into a nice, big, long stretch. And just at that time, my sister came around the corner from her kitchen, and kind of hands on her hip, she said, "What are you doing to my dog?" And I said, because I wasn't paying attention, I said, "Well, I'm stretching him." And she said, "Well, that's really weird because he gets all kinds of body work and massages, and nobody's ever done it like that." And it started this eureka moment in this question. I had learned evidence-based rehab as a human physio. And why, if I had learned evidence-based rehab, much of the research had been done on animal models, why weren't we treating the dogs like that? So my inquisitive mind couldn't let that go. And I went to the research and started looking around and thought to myself, I think we should be treating dogs the same way we're treating humans. It was animal evidence that led to what we know in human rehab at that time. And so over a weekend, my sister and I wrote a desktop how to stretch your dog book. It was about 25 pages long. We had all our friends bring their dogs over, and we had these mechanics lights hanging from my sister's walls and my massage table up. It was just totally schmaltzy, right? But we created this desktop book, and then we sent it to the only dog publisher we knew. And we were so excited when we sent it because you had to send everything on email. So we sent it in, and we got back the form letter that says, "We'll call you in 8 weeks if we ever call you." So we were, so deflated because we'd worked so hard on our little book. And then on Monday, we got back an actual letter from the editor at the company that said, "We want to publish your book." And that quick turnaround time plus the eureka moment was this combo that made me feel like, oh my gosh, the universe is opening this door for me and I've got to walk through. So in the process of writing that first book, The Healthy Way to Stretch Your Dog, I was looking for a veterinarian who could clinically edit the book. And I couldn't find a veterinarian anywhere who knew anything about stretching. So I went online and found this place called Canine Rehab Institute, which looked like veterinarians and physios doing animal therapy. And so I emailed them, and they were willing to do a clinical edit on the book. And so that made my connection into Canine Rehab Institute. Book got published. I got trained through CRI, and then that just started me on the path, and that was 11 years ago now.
Wow. You actually have 12 books published. So is that one a year that you've done since that first one?
Oh my gosh, sometimes it's more than one a year. I haven't published any books in a year because it takes a lot of work. I published my first 2 books, The Healthy Way to Stretch Your Dog and Canine Cross Training, through a publisher. And I learned very quickly that with traditional publishing, they have all the power and they get to make a lot of money. And I do all the work. So I thought to myself, how can I self-publish and see if I can self-publish? Because the field was so new and the research changes every year, leaps at this phase in canine rehab. So by self-publishing, it also makes my books more nimble, where I can update every year or two the content that's in the books so that it better reflects what's actually happening with the research. And with a traditional publisher, that's just not possible. One book is out for 10 years before you can do an edit on the book. So I switched to self-publishing after 2 with a publisher.
And it's quite easy nowadays to self-publish, right? I mean, there are loads of people on Amazon that have books that are self-publishing them. I think that Amazon actually helps you. They've got like a whole sort of self-publishing section to it. So all those vet rehabbers out there that have information that they want to share, think about it. Think about self-publishing a book.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. Amazon is a fantastic place to sell books. Amazon also has its own way of kind of controlling you and your content in the market. So there are some ways around that, and there are some options, but I highly recommend people consider self-publishing if they are doing a book that needs to be small and nimble. Yeah. I think textbooks are still best done by the big publishing houses because they're so big and cumbersome. But for smaller stuff, yeah, for sure, self-publish.
So for the listeners out there, Sasha has got 12 books, and we will put the link. It's called the Canine Rehab Shop, right? Where you can look at all those books, and there are links to buy them on Amazon, to actually buy them directly on your website, and I think one other place where you can buy them. So these are books that are actually for vet rehab therapists, right?
Yep, there are a series of books, specifically clinical manuals for rehab therapists. So there are home exercise programs, and there are home exercises, and there are treatment guidelines, all the things that I wished I had when I was a brand new canine rehabber, because there weren't any resources when I started.
And so the first one was about stretching. So was that more aimed at the pet owner, and then you made a shift to vet rehab therapists, or was that first one for vet rehab therapists?
Well, it was really for both. It was really to get this concept of stretching into the world, because the biggest thing I heard when people were uneducated about any kind of canine rehab is, oh, but my dog stretches itself. And that is true, right? Healthy young dogs with normal range of motion will often stretch themselves. But there are also places in the body, like the iliopsoas, the sartorius, the caudal shoulder muscles, that the dogs can't really stretch. So my goal with that book was just to get the concept into the world, like sprinkling water on new grass. Let's just soak it in as a profession, and then understand that it really should be part of the rehab treatments and part of the home plans for the owners too.
So let's chat a little bit about the Canine Rehab Institute. So you obviously approached them, and now you're actually on the faculty, so you actually lecture for them. Together with writing your books and doing that, when do you have time to practice? Are you practicing at the moment, or are you just doing the teaching?
No. I do many things, and I think by nature a lot of energy. I am a go to bed early, get up early girl, and I do not watch television. I spend most of my free time with friends and family. So I think I've taken a lot of things out of my life so that I can do all this stuff. By those things I've taken out, I mean not watching television, etc. So now my life looks like my clinical practice is at Colorado State University. So I moved my clinical practice over there because I had this goal after the books and starting my first canine rehab business that I wanted to actually have a life instead of just having a canine rehab practice. And when I first built my very first canine rehab practice, it very quickly, with a business partner, turned into 3 practices, a lot of practice management, a lot of staff management, training, etc. So it started to pull me away from that eureka moment where I wanted to bring the level of canine rehab to the level of human rehab. So after a few years of that practice, I switched my life up and I decided to move all my books to self-publishing because then I had control of the content. It also created passive income. So passive income is lovely because you can make it in your sleep. And then you wake up and you have a little bit more money and you've also done something to help your profession. So it feels good at both levels. My clinical practice, I moved to university because university is quite flexible and university would allow me to still go teach with Canine Rehab Institute and run a clinical practice there. They let me start the human model of canine rehab in a veterinary teaching hospital. And we went from, when I started, it was Sasha the PT and Dr. Dewar the surgeon, just the 2 of us. And now 7 years later, there are 13 people on our team. And so clinical practice at CSU, self-publishing at home, and then 4 times a year, I get to go hang out with physios and teach at CRI. So we get to travel to Florida. I live in Colorado, and so some of the classes are here. And then once a year, every other year, we'll travel to Australia or Europe to go teach also. So it's a mixed bag. It's quite busy, but I love it very much.
It sounds like you've really got the balance. And I think that's one of the challenges that a lot of us have. So, I mean, and I think it's a challenge that vets have too. So as a vet, I have lots of friends who say to me, they just want to be vets. So they have their own practices and they hate the practice management side of things. They hate dealing with the staff and they just say like, I just want to be a vet. And it's the same for us vet rehabbers. You know, we just want to treat animals, but there comes with that when you own a practice, all those business side of things. And I think sometimes we just hide our heads in the sand and just ignore all those things that we have to do and just get on with the things that we like to do. But with that comes challenges, you know, because we spend the whole day treating patients and then it ends up at night having to do loads of admin, which we hate doing. And most of the time, we're not really sure if we're doing everything that we should be. So, I mean, when you were in it and you are obviously not having that work-life balance, what is it that made you sort of shift and say, actually, I can't do this anymore? Were you at the stage of burnout, or was it just, you know, you were perceptive enough to know this is not sustainable?
For me, it was really pulling me away from the vision of what I wanted in canine rehab, that human level of rehab. And I could feel myself getting pulled away from that. So I wasn't sleeping as well. I was feeling like I got on this road. I loved what I was doing. Now I'm waking up. I'm not really loving what I'm doing. So when I first started my business, I had a business coach. And fantastic guy. There is small business development centers all over the United States where you can go and take business classes for very nominal fees. So I did that, had built my business plan, had gotten a business coach. What I realized is my first business coach had, he's kind of like the old school business guy. He had a wife at home who cooked all his meals and did his laundry. And he had these 4 businesses, and all he had to do was run the businesses. And I realized as a woman, I needed a different path also, because family is very important to me. I'm very connected to my friends. I call my friends my tribe. So I wanted to create space for that. So I got a different business coach. And I got a business coach who put me first. His name is Travis. And Travis was really great about saying to me when I was getting ready to say yes to something, because, as business owners, we always feel like we need to say yes to things. He would say, hey, Sasha, before you say yes, is what you're about to decide going to get you closer to what you want, or is it going to pull you further away from what you want? And that was very helpful for me. He actually had to say those words in my ear for about a year before I started to really integrate that into my life. So, for example, on the business side of life, one of the things I had to realize that being a business owner and having 3 clinics was not the best choice for me. So I had to change my path. And changing that path was often devastating because I felt like I was walking away from the business I had started. But in time, it was the best decision I made, because now I'm in a place where, with the help of Travis and some other business coaches along the way, I have a lot of professional things in my life, but I also have very good work-life balance. And that comes from having a coach who knew how to coach me through it. He had what I wanted.
I mean, I always recommend to the online pet health vet rehabbers, I say to them, find somebody that can be your mentor, that can support you. And I mean, I myself mentor many vet rehabbers, and I just had a conversation today with a vet rehabber, and she just actually didn't know where she was going. And, I said to her, and because of that, she didn't really know what to say yes to and what to say no to. And as you say, she just said yes in the fear that she was missing out on opportunities. And, we had this discussion, and I said, you really have to decide where you're going. So what is your goal? What is your direction? Because if you don't have that, you don't know what to say yes to, and you don't know what to say no to.
Right.
So it's such great advice, because otherwise we end up doing things, and our path is this windy path, and it takes us so long to get where we are, and then we make the wrong decisions, and then we have to reroute and get back on the path again. So when you know what you're going to and what you're heading for, you can make the right decisions. But I must say, if I recall myself, when I first opened up my practice, I used to say yes to absolutely everything. And if a magazine emailed me and said, will you write this article? And somebody said, will you come and talk here? I'd say yes, 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 yes. To my detriment, because sometimes they were worthwhile, other times they weren't at all worthwhile. And I didn't have time to do all the things, but I didn't know which ones were the right ones. So yeah, it's great advice. You mustn't be saying yes to everything. You have to know whether it's actually taking you in the right direction. So one thing I want to say is that obviously not everyone has the opportunity to change their practices. So some of us are in the practice and we don't have this work life balance. What advice could you give to them if they're in a situation where they can't completely change things, just having a practice and just working hours that are just crazy, and getting to that point where they think, well, actually, I don't know if I like doing this anymore.
I know that's such a hard place to be in, because when you're that tired, it's hard to make right decisions for your life. So I'm obviously big on coaching. I hired Gwen out of Spiral Coaching. I'm working with her this year specifically on how to draw boundaries in my clinical practice. So the practice over at CSU Vet Teaching Hospital is a crazy busy practice. We see probably 100 visits a week, everything from tetraplegic Great Danes through national level agility athletes. So it's this broad spectrum. And in the rehab department, there are only 2.5 of us. So 13 people on the entire sports medicine team, but only 2.5 of us. So when I started working with Gwen, she would ask me to just ask questions of myself. So if I got done at the end of the day and I was exhausted, looking back at my day, what made me exhausted? Was it the sheer volume of cases? Was it the fact that I didn't eat lunch? Very common. Was it the fact that I forgot to drink a glass of water? Very common. So as I did this, and I didn't have to do it for very long, I think I did it for 2 weeks. And I got kind of a handle on, oh, I'm creating patterns in my clinical day. So I always had this perception that clinic was pushing these boundaries down on me, but I run the clinic. So if my problem is that I'm not eating lunch, that's actually not the clinic's problem. That is the fact that instead of me saying, no, I can't see this dog right now, I'm leaving for lunch, that I said, yes, I'll see one more patient and then I'll go to lunch, right? And it may be just part of the caregiving nature of those of us that go into veterinary medicine and canine rehab. We want to help, we feel good helping, but we help to the detriment of ourselves. So one of the things I would recommend to people is right now in your practice, if you are exhausted and thinking this is no different than my previous profession, just for 2 weeks, at the end of the day, write down what made you tired, what made you unhappy in this day. And when you identify the patterns, then kind of step back and say, well, how can I change that? Do I need to say no? Do I need to be realistic and bring my lunch to work? Do I need to change the way I schedule my patients? Right? That's been very helpful to me. The other thing that has been transformative is telling my clients, I'm a rehab therapist participating in self-care in the veterinary world. That's part of what I do. And my clients at first were like, oh, that's very interesting. What does that mean that you're participating in self-care? And then I would bring up how the suicide rate has been increasing in veterinary medicine. Now veterinary medicine has the highest suicide rate of any profession in the US at least. And how important it is for us to model self-care for the students so that they learn how to draw boundaries, how to bring their lunch, how to create a life instead of getting crushed by their profession. So figuring out the patterns, learning to say no, finding people who back you up when you say no, right? People don't like to hear no at first.
Yeah, I think the boundaries is such a big thing. I mean, as you're saying that now, I was just thinking about myself. Before I closed down my practice, when I had my second child, so I took a sabbatical, I remember just consulting flat out throughout the day. And I had that, I just couldn't say no, and I think you're right. I think it's just that caregiving side of us that we just know that we can help. And then when somebody phones and says, my dog is in pain, it's so hard to say no. You just think, well, I can help, but to the detriment of myself, definitely. I mean, I've multiple times throughout practice, whether it be veterinary or veterinary rehabilitation, have been at the point of burnout. I wouldn't say I've ever had proper burnout, but I've been at the point, and I've become aware of it. And I recall actually a time, this is not in veterinary rehabilitation, but I recall a time in veterinary where I was working late. So it was like 6:30 at night. And I had a function on, and I'd missed my own birthday party like the week before that. Like everyone was at a restaurant, and I got there at 9:00, and it was my birthday party for an emergency. And this has just been going on and on. And I remember somebody phoned and they said, like, my dog has got like something in its ear or something. I can't remember exactly what it was. And I got angry. My thought was anger towards that animal. And I was like, whoa, what was that about? Because I'd never had that feeling. It has always been empathy, like, no, like, please bring your dog down. Like, and I just thought that poor dog can't go like that, for the night. And my feeling wasn't empathy. It was anger. Like, why now does this dog have to have this, And I remember that day just thinking, whoa, something's wrong. Like, something is so wrong with me right now. Like, I shouldn't be thinking that. And I think it's awareness. And like you say, like, you actually need people around you that are working with you to support you in that. So they also need to be aware. So whether it's the receptionist or, and if we set the boundaries, we need that other person to support us in it, not to make us feel bad, like say, a shame, like, you better see that dog, and so it is so hard though. It really, really, really is so hard.
It's hard. And a couple other things that I've learned that have been helpful are, because it is hard to leave a dog in pain, so we have connected with other referral options in our area. So if a client calls us at 4:30 in the afternoon and says, hey, my dog went down yesterday, he got an MRI, he's not a surgical candidate, but he's in pain, can you get him in? We can say, we're sorry we cannot get him in, but here are 3 options in the area where you could take your dog. And initially that was very hard for me because that was referring outside of my clinical practice. But you know what it did is it created great relationships with other clinical practices, because now we're sending patients to them. So in return, they now send patients back to us too. So that was very helpful. And then sharing the boundary with clients, because I don't know in your experience, but in my experience, I always have this handful of clients where an emergency is maybe not an emergency. My dog is, oh no, Sasha, her top line is off and the show is on Saturday. So for those animals, what we can say is, I hear that your dog's top line is off. I am completely booked. And then if they get upset, you say, oh, I'm modeling this self-care thing. If I bring your dog in, that's me kind of breaking my own rule. And the first 3 times you do that, it feels horrible and uncomfortable. But then after that, your clients learn.
Yeah.
And now, instead of waiting until the Thursday before the show, they will schedule 2 weeks in advance and be respectful of your time. So there's a training your clients component too that goes with it. And that for me was harder than training the doctors and the staff.
Yeah, I mean, I think for those of you that are starting your practices now, this is something you really must listen to, because if you start off and you start like that, then it's okay. The shift is trying to change your ways, because there's big pushback from that. So when you've been that person who just, yes, you'll do anything whenever, and then suddenly you say no, they don't like it. But like you say, it takes a while, and then they're like, okay, like she's not budging on this and it's actually important. And I think you're right. Like if you can explain to them it's about self-care, because, you know, if you're about to burn out and you're exhausted, you can't treat properly. Your mind is not in a good state. Your body is tense. You're not able to actually treat properly. And if they know, they need to know that, you know, that you have to be in a state in which you can be able to treat effectively and get the outcomes that you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay to, I mean, when you're first starting practice and trying to build a clientele, you will likely accept clients, any client who's going to come to you. But as you grow, you can start to kind of define what that is. And in the process of me drawing boundaries with my clients, I lost quite a few clients to other clinics who had been with me from the start. And that was emotionally a little bit hurtful, but it also changed my practice because I was no longer giving these 3 very needy clients 50% of my time. Now I could take care of 10 clients that were respectful of my time. And that was a process, not an easy process, but if people are at that spot, I recommend starting to pick the clients that make your life happy and maybe referring the clients that aren't making you happy, maybe referring them out.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about firing our clients. So, I mean, I actually had a client that I fired in the end. I actually said to her, I don't think that I can help you anymore. After her being with me for about 5 years. And I said to her that I'm happy to refer her to somebody else, because I felt like every day she was just unhappy with the outcome, and her idea of what was supposed to be the outcome was completely unrealistic. And no matter how much I told her, and I must say, it was so hard to do, but it felt so good afterwards. And I'm so light afterwards not having her, because it was literally every day. I was on the phone to her or emailing her or WhatsApping her. And then when she came into the clinic, it was always an hour more than it should have been, you know, and trying to get to other patients. And so sometimes we have to make the choices, just like they choose to come to us. Sometimes we need to choose, actually, are you right for me, you know?
Right.
But you're only able to do that when you have a whole lot more clients, you know? So in the early days, you just take whoever you can get, you know? But it is quite good when you have one of those kind of really, really needy clients. And it's fine if they're needy and you're supporting them and helping them. But the worst is when you're actually not doing what you should be doing. So you're not supporting them because they just keep saying that they're not getting anywhere. They're not getting what they want from you, or their dog isn't, or their cat isn't. And that's hard too, because you just get despondent, because you just feel like I'm not doing anything. I'm not helping here.
Well, and then there becomes the word of mouth issue too, right? So if your clients are not feeling neutral to uplifted by your services, they're going to take whatever attitude they leave your clinic with out into the world. And it might just be the lady that they're talking to at the grocery store, but she might have 3 dogs and 6 neighbors and 4 veterinarians. And so it's really kind of thinking about how you want to align yourself in the market. Like for us over at the university, we're a very complicated specialty practice. So our rehab practice reflects that, right? For us, that's very good, because we'll take a dog who's had a pelvic fracture and a femur fracture and multiple surgeries, and that dog walks out of the hospital. So of course they say fantastic things. They thought their dog was going to die. So in our circumstance, the word of mouth is a little bit different than it is for private practice, where a client's subjective perception of how their dog's doing might have everything to do with how nice you were to the client today. You know, it makes it harder in private practice.
So interesting that clients, So my colleague that I referred her to, she phoned me and she said, "Oh, thanks so much for that one. Like, I just had my first consultation." And then I think about 6 months later, my colleague fired her. And then she phoned me back and she said, "I want to come back to you." And I was like, "No, you're not."
Yeah. Yeah. Some of the clients I've lost have also done rehab hopping.
Yeah.
So they've now gone to multiple other rehab therapists too. Mhm.
Yeah. In the veterinary world, yeah, we call them vet hoppers.
Yeah.
So you get them.
Yeah.
Let's take a little shift away from that and chat about your canine exercise program. So I'm so excited to see this. So you really are a true entrepreneur. So from writing books to your practices, you've developed basically and founded this canine exercise platform. Tell us a little bit about it, because I think the vet rehabbers will really be interested in this because this is something that they can use.
Yeah. So as a canine rehab therapist, my goal is to always bring what we're doing up to the human level that I was practicing in. And in the human level, I always had this software where I could choose my exercises, modify them on the fly, and then email my clients the home exercises. And when I came into the canine world, that didn't exist. Programs that were out on the market, but it didn't quite meet my vision for what I wanted for my practice. So in my practice, there are a few veins that are my non-negotiables. Number one is that the dogs always need to be happy. So with canine home exercises, we shot for 5 days in a video shoot set with a dozen different dogs. And for some of those 30-second videos that are in there, we probably did 10 shots, because the most important thing for me in the videos is that the dogs are happy. So, just like with us, when you start something new, you're insecure, you're not quite sure what you're doing, and that's the vibe you put off. Same thing with the dogs. So once they get fun. So the dogs must always be happy. Number two, the skill level must always be exceptionally high. Meaning, if we're doing passive range motion, it must be actually passive range motion and not stretching. And then the third thing is that I wanted it to just be easy to use. I had created a home exercise book where we could print out exercises, but it wasn't robust enough to fit the practice. So I met up with Physiotech, who also does some of the other animal platforms that are out on the market. And I said to them, I'd love to use your software to develop this home exercise program that kind of raised the bar on what we're doing in canine rehab. And after many long months of visiting and negotiating and figuring out how do you do video sets and keep dogs happy, it is a very hard project with very tight closed sets. We decided to team up and do that. So the platform has just been out for a year, and it has about 400 exercises in it now. It has 74 pre-populated templates, and we're just getting ready to add 10 more templates to the platform. So basically, you open the platform up on the web. You have options. You can click on which exercises you want, and it will populate the exercises. Or it also has a smart feature. So if you are treating something specific, let's say you have a flexicarpial nares injury, you can type flexicarpial nares into the search bar, and it will populate the exercises for you, and it will also tell you what's level 1, 2, 3, 4 in athletic level. So if you're working in dynamic environments like I am, where we have often students in the platform choosing exercises, I can say to them, I need an iliopsoas level 1, please. And then they can pick some exercises safely. So those exercises then come together in an email. You email to the client. The client opens the email and clicks on the video link so they can see the exercises. And now there's a brand new feature where the clients can monitor the exercises online at home. So they can say how difficult it was, how many reps they did, etc. And what the platform's done for my clinical practice is we practice very high level diagnostic-based rehab. And so now I have this home exercise program that matches that level of rehab that the clients can then do at home. So I'm excited about it. We love using it.
It's such a great idea, because I remember in practice, you would show the owner the exercises and they would go home, and then they'd come back the next visit and you'd say, how did you get on with the exercises? And they were like, well, I didn't quite really remember how to do it. And you say, okay, show me again. And they could not remember it all. I mean, now with cell phones, it's quite nice to be able to actually film it for them. So when you're doing it, you tell them to actually film it. But it's very different when you're doing it. And when they're filming, they might not film exactly where the feet are. So then they film your hands, and then they look at it, and then they didn't quite understand actually, because they don't understand. So then the next time they look, they just see you with your hands over the hips doing a little weight shift, but they can't see what the feet look like. So if they're filming it, it's one of those kind of things where it's so handy to have that, and they'll have access to videos actually to show them exactly how they should do it and talk them through it. And also sometimes we don't have time, to be honest. I mean, if you think about how long it takes to do that when you're explaining to them, so you quickly show them. So I think it's really, really great. Do you have a trial on that so that somebody could have a look at it and just test it out?
Yep, there's a free trial. So if you just go to the website, Canine Home Exercises, there are lots of links on there to get to your free trial. Just email the team and they'll be happy to set you up with a free trial. You can get in there and play with it. One of the features we use the most in clinic that saves a lot of time is the template feature. So if you open the templates, there are pre-populated exercises for specific diagnoses. So say, for example, post-op stifle. We probably see 10 of those a week. So instead of us having to go in and recreate that, we can just go to the template, and then you can flip the videos so that you can change it from right to left. So you just switch right to left and change the directions as you need to, and off it goes. Less than a minute to do your home plan for your post-op orthopedic cases.
Awesome. I love it. So Vet Rehabbers, if you're interested in looking at this program, there's a free trial. I'll put the link in the podcast notes. Sasha, it's been awesome to chat to you. And, we had a list of things we were going to chat about, but I think we're just about over an hour already. So we're definitely going to have to get you back on the podcast so we can finish all the things that we have to chat about. But it's been fabulous chatting to you, and thank you for all your advice. Just chatting about the practice and the work-life balance, I think has been so valuable. And Vet Rehabbers, I want you guys just to have a listen to that, because it doesn't have to be working crazy hours, feeling stressed out all the time. It really doesn't. You've got to set those boundaries and learn what to say yes to.
Thanks so much for having me. I grew up in a tiny town in the mountains, and I love to sit and have a visit. So happy to visit anytime.
Awesome. Thanks, Sasha. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Vet Rehabbers, for more information on how to take your career to the next level, go to www.onlinepethealth.com. Please don't forget to subscribe to my podcast so you'll get notified. I'm here every single week talking to vet rehabbers from all over the world, learning, and I would love you to join me. Hope you have an awesome day further. Cheers for now.